Legion has come with lofty expectations and a lot of media attention since its Western market debut in Can Jam, New York City. But is it worthy of all the hype? Hey folks, I'm Matthew from Bloom Audio, and today we're going to be taking a look at the FlipEars Legion, an IEM coming in at $849 with a dynamic driver, a bone conduction driver, and a Spark electric tweeter. We're not going to waste any time, we're just going to get it right into build and design because Legion starts off with a bang right off the bat. FlipEars really made a statement here visually with Legion. The amount of time, the attention to detail, and the craftsmanship behind Legion's faceplate really is second to none in my opinion in the sub $1,000 price bracket. The intricate detail, the relatively lightweight nature of this shell and faceplate really does a good job in making sure you can go long into your listening sessions without any sort of fatigue. Now, I do think it would be smart for FlipEars to come out with a different faceplate option for this one. I have seen some photos of that online, because let's just be honest, this is not the most practical design approach. While I do think FlipEars did a good job of maintaining a relatively lightweight shell, I do think this is going to attract a few eyes if you're going to take this one outside the house. Now, as for the unboxing experience, we did receive a demo unit for evaluation, so we do not have the full package here, but I would say to set your expectations relatively high. I would most likely expect some Baroque ear tips, a foam ear tip option, a pretty nice cable, a leather carrying case, and a microfiber cleaning cloth. You may also get some extra added goodies. We got like a sealed letter with ours with a real wax stamp. It was the whole 9 yards. So FlipEars definitely sets the bar pretty high in their unboxing experience. Now, as for my tip of choice, this one was pretty easy. It was the L-Tech Baroque. It came with it. I always have that one in my collection. It's a great ear tip. So do your due diligence, tip roll with this one. But as for me, definitely rocked with the Baroque here. Alrighty folks, with all that out of the way, we can finally get into sound. Of course, we're going to start off with objective sound, and as always, you have the graph on your screen. I have it here on my phone. We're going to be talking a lot about Legion's bass because that is definitely the key highlight of this sound signature. The bass here, or really any graph, is not going to be demonstrated properly, and usually that is the case with bone conduction IEMs. You really do have to hear and experience this bass to really understand it, because looking at this graph, I just feel like it's very understated. The bass really has a genuine feel to it. It rattles, it shakes. It is bombastic, and you really do just have to hear it to experience it. As for the mids, I do think this is Legion's weakest link, but we're gonna go into a little bit more detail about that in the subjective sound. Here, you can tell that there is a pretty solid bass tuck. I still don't think it's enough to really create the amount of separation I personally like in the mid-range, but again, we'll break that down a little bit further here. As for the upper mid-range, you have pretty decent presence to vocals, and moving into the treble, there's some oddities and some peaks here, but for the most part, it stays relatively well controlled. There isn't ever a time in my listening where I thought the treble was too much or too relaxed. I thought it was pretty well tuned for the most part. But again, there were just a little bit of those peaks that kind of threw me off in my listening sessions. Now moving into subjective sound, again, Legion's bass is really what's going to captivate you and keep you listening for more. The rhythm section here, the percussion, everything that involves a bass tone, Legion just knocks out of the park. It is a very fun and upbeat listen. Everything just has really good texture to it, and you, again, really feel this bass. When I first started in this hobby, I saw bone conduction drivers a lot and would always be drawn to them because I felt like, yeah, that's gonna give me the bass I really, really want. Yeah, I got something that was very well textured and extended, but with a name like bone conduction, I really wanna feel it. Legion honestly was one of the first IEMs to really separate itself in this department. I do feel like I felt that bass, that shake, that rumble. Really everything here in the low end just has that kind of chaotic and upbeat nature to it that really is fun and addicting. Playboi Carti's newest album, Music, was a mainstay in my listening here with Legion, whether it was Mojo Jojo, Evil Jordan, Wake Up Filthy, all of these tracks just had incredible playback with Legion, and I really had a lot of fun here in my listening with Legion. And now moving into the mids, this is kind of where the hype train stops a little bit for me. While I do feel for the most part Legion offers a very coherent sound signature, even with that bombastic bass response, I do feel as though the mids kind of hold this set back a little bit. There was just this general contrast in the mid-range that didn't really pair too well with the bass response in my opinion, as everything had this artificial sense of weight to it. So yeah, while the bass is really upbeat and fun, the strings, plucks, pulls also just had this added sense of weight, and everything just kind of blended together and had a sense of congestion to it. This also added a little bit of a veiled nature and haze to the vocals that just kind of killed their definition a little bit. Although they still came through with good presence, I felt like the overall level of clarity in vocals was just a little bit of a downer for me. This general haze and veiled nature of the mid-range has always kind of been my biggest critique of FlipEars offerings in the past, and I actually feel like Legion has somewhat upped the ante here in terms of how much definition it offers in contrast to FlipEars' other offerings, but I still would like to see just a little bit more here, as I think it would bring the entire sound signature just to a next level. Like I mentioned in the objective portion of this video, there are some peaks and oddities here in the treble response, but for 90% of my playback, I feel as though this was not an issue. Even for most treble sensitive listeners, I feel like Legion isn't going to prove to be too much of a problem here. I think for the most part, it did stay relatively well controlled, still had a good amount of definition and clarity to it without being overly sharp or unnatural. Finishing up with soundstage and imaging, I do wish Legion had a little bit more room to breathe. I wish instruments just had a little bit more space away from each other, as it feels though some tracks could have a slight sense of congestion here. But for the most part, again, Legion had a pretty natural playback without ever sounding too artificial, too stretched out, or just too closed in. My main point of comparison here with the Legion was the The Audio Origin, and while I do think these two could coexist in a collection, I think they are aiming for a similar goal in their tuning. The Origin is going for a more sub-bass emphasized low end, where I feel like the Origin had a little bit more mid-bass cracks, had better dynamics to it in general, and I do feel as though Legion really stole the show here in the bass department. However, The Audio is notorious for that bass tuck, and I feel like this really helped Origin separate itself in the mid-range, while I do feel like there is a very large layer of warmth over top of Origin's sound signature as a whole. I do feel like there was better separation here in the mids when compared to Legion. As for the vocals, I feel like it's pick and choose. While Origins are slightly less veiled, they are a little bit more forward in the mix and just a little bit more unnatural to me, while Legions do have that slight sense of veil to them, but they feel a little bit more accurate in the mix. The treble here is tough, as I feel like Origin is just very exaggerated. It has a little bit of an artificial sense to it in its playback, where Legion does have those oddities and peaks, so I would kind of consider this a toss-up, while I would slightly lean with Legion's treble response if I did have to choose. So again, there are pros and cons for this kind of tuning. While you are getting such an exciting and lively bass response, does creep into that mid-range a little bit, and while Origin kind of masks it a little bit better with that bass tuck, you still have that artificial sense of exaggeration in the treble, that overall layer of warmth that does make things a little bit too soft, but also Legion has that added sense of weight to everything in the mid-range. So again, this tuning is really tough to get right, and I do want to give credit to both The Audio and FlipEars because I think they executed it relatively well. So where does that leave us with Legion? Is it worthy of all this attention, all of this hype that it's getting? For the most part, I see why listeners are super drawn to this one. Like I mentioned earlier, this feels like the first time the Bone Conduction name has really lived up to what it set out to do. If I had to choose who this IEM was for, I would say it is a specialist. If you have been searching for that bass response that is super upbeat and super engaging, that is Legion. This is what it's set out to do. Now, if you're in the other boat and this is your first IEM and you're seeking something that just really does it all, I don't really think that's Legion. So if you're looking at Legion, I would set your expectations accordingly. For me, there are some other options in this price range that I do feel like I would prefer over this one. But if you're looking for a set that really takes the Bone Conduction driver to the next level and just wants something extremely fun, that's exactly what Legion is set out to do. Thanks so much for watching. You can check out Legion and a lot of other great products at bloomaudio.com. If you want to learn more about Legion in a more intimate setting, feel free to hit us up at hello@bloomaudio.com or jump into a live chat where me and my colleagues are ready and willing to discuss Legion a little bit further with you. If you just have a general comment about Legion or really any of the products we carry here at Bloom, leave a comment down below. I try to get back to every single comment left on my videos. Be sure to like and subscribe, so we'll be back soon with more high fidelity audio content.